Welcome all the students of class 10, parents, teachers and other viewers. You are now in the social studies class. We have a student with us in the studio. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Rahul. I'm from Mothers International School, New Delhi.
Thank you. You are aware that social science constitutes many subjects: history, geography, economics, political science, sociology and many others. Among all the social sciences, economics is an important subject and also interesting subject. This subject is introduced from class 6 onwards in rudimentary form. Some simple economic concepts which we come across in our daily lives are introduced in class 9th and 10th. In previous sessions, we discussed about and we also familiarized you about development, what is development, how development is measured and some of the important development indicators. Today we are going to have discussion on an important topic called gross domestic product. What are the discussion points today? We are going to expand the discussion of the previous chapter, that how income is used as an indicator of a country's performance. You know that in the previous lessons, you talked about, you discussed about the table, how to interpret a table, how to read a table. Today we are going to go little beyond. We are going to see bar diagrams, pie diagrams, how they can be read as a student, so that we develop the analytical skills. In higher secondary stage or in secondary stage, we need to develop important skills, analytical skills, so that we can understand the society, we can understand the data. We are also going to understand important skill called classification skills. When you are classifying something, when you are seeing many things, you have to learn to classify one. So this is an important skill which we have to get familiarized today. We are also interdependent. Okay, there are many sectors, many activities going on in the country. So we are going to talk about this interdependency of us, how we are depending on each other. Then one important economic concepts which you are going to study not only from this year onwards, till you complete your career, or even if you are joining a job market, you are going to come across this term called gross domestic product. So we are going to understand some simple way how what is this concept of gross domestic product. Okay, and we also give you some illustrative example. And before I start explanation, let me give you a simple activity. So what you do, imagine that you are in the house right now, and you just list some 20 to 25 items that are there in your house. I'll give you 2 minutes time, and just list them out and make a classification. So can you do that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Let us take 1 minute time. Just list out all the items in your house. You can just look around and list those items. Rahul, I'm sure you must have made a list of it. Can you just read out the items that you have noted in your house? Just read one by one slowly.
Books, chairs, television, doors, clock, pen, refrigerators, bed, photos, bag, rice, wheat, soap, detergent, slippers, wires, bulb, tube light, shirts, t-shirts, etc.
Very good. So you can use some criteria to classify those items. I'm sure you must have done some classifications. Can you share what are the classification you were able to make?
Okay. So books that we have that are from paper and from woods.
So the wood-based materials, that is one classification. What are the other classifications you made?
Television, that are plastic and metals. Clocks, pen, those are a lot of plastics.
So the chemical-based materials, that's the second classification.
Soap, detergent, slippers.
Yeah, so the chemicals, also the second and third category. And you can see like this in your house also, you can discuss with your parents about the list, and then you can also develop your own classification. And when you get time with your teacher, and then please show these items and your classification also. Okay, so generally if you look at the goods that we see here, in this session we are going to classify them on specific criteria, so that we will understand the concept of gross domestic product clearly. I'll show you one item. Generally, the goods can be classified on the basis of the production process, how it is produced, or at what stage of the production process it is there. I'll show you one example. You can see this is wheat. Okay, the wheat is the basic food grain produced by the farmers. Okay, when it is used by people, who are all people like we are all using as a food grain in our house. So the bakers, they use the hotel people, in order to make rotis, they use, the biscuit companies they use. For all of them, this commodity is raw material. Okay, so the first classification when it comes to the nature of the use in the production process, the first stage it is coming to those producers. So that is why it is called raw materials. The second category is intermediate goods. So if you look at intermediate goods, for example, the same wheat, when it goes to a baker, for a baker, flour is an intermediate good. Okay, it is not a final good. Okay, it is intermediate good. It is not yet ready. Okay, from wheat it goes to flour. Okay, so this commodity which is used in the production process to make the final goods, that is coming under the intermediate goods. The final one is that, for example, bread. We all buy bread from the shop. If you look at, so this is a final goods. Okay, all the goods that reach finally at the destination of the consumer is called final goods. Okay, you can see that bread. Okay, so in this way, commodities can be classified into three categories. Okay, those goods which are at the first level, it's called raw materials, and those who are in the middle stage of the production processes, they are called intermediate goods, and the final stage, it reaches the consumers, the users, final users, that becomes the final goods. Okay, and then similarly, you can also classify goods on the basis of the nature of the production process. Okay, what is this nature of the production process? Generally, economic activities, we are all working. For example, I am working here as a teacher educator, and my colleagues are working in the studio, and many people are engaged in different economic activities. Okay, these economic activities, on the basis of the goods and services they produce, they can be grouped into, those economic activities can be grouped into three. What are they? Primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, these are one classification. There are many number of classifications, but this is one fundamental classification generally economies or governments make actually. What is this primary, secondary, and tertiary? How it is produced?
From the farms, from the fields.
Very good. So it is cultivated, it is harvested, the farmers produce by using the nature.
Yes.
Okay, and by using some simple raw materials, and mainly by the nature. Okay, yes. So whenever any goods are produced from the nature, land or the earth, mainly, you may be putting other raw materials like fertilizers, seeds, so on. But if you produce from the nature, if you extract from nature, all those economic activities are called primary sector. Okay, they can be considered as primary sector. If you go to higher classes, you will come to know this is called agriculture and adult activities. And for example, the mining, you extract iron ore. Okay, that is also primary activity, because you are extracting from the nature. Okay, this is the primary sector commodity. What is the secondary sector commodity? Let me give you another example. Two examples I have here. So what is this? This is a wheat flour. Okay, this is the wheat flour. So wheat flour is made in where? Factories. Okay, you use the primary commodity of wheat and make it into flour by using the machinery.
Yes.
Okay, so when you are just changing from one form to other form by the machineries, it becomes the secondary sector. It is also considered as manufacturing sector. Okay, but not it is more than manufacturing sector. So converting from a natural product to the other forms, all other forms, that is coming under the secondary sector. What is this? This is the sugar. Okay, the sugar is, you get sugar from where?
Sugarcane.
Sugarcane from the fields. So the farmers bring the sugarcane from the fields, and then they bring it to the sugar mill, and then many chemicals are used to come out with the sugar. Okay, these two products are the products from the secondary sector. Okay, let me tell you, the secondary sector could be in many ways. For example, not only one stage, it can go to 2 stage, 3 stage, 4 stage, 5 stage. For example, if you look at iron ore is extracted from the primary sector, but it may be made into plates, it may be big steel plates, big iron rods, it can go to many other processes. For example, the studio materials, the metal based iron materials are here coming under different processes actually. Okay, different stages it must have come across. Okay, so in all those stages, some kind of factory based activities taking place, changing forms. Okay, they change different forms actually. Okay, so that comes under the secondary sector. third category of activity comes under the tertiary sector. The tertiary sector activities are all those activities which are supporting the primary sector and tertiary secondary sector.
Okay.
For example, let us take an example of transport. For example, how did you come? You must have come by a bus. Okay, so the bus is a part of the transport sector. And farmers, let us take this example of the wheat. Okay, wheat, in order to come from the his field, farmer's field or a field, to the market, you have to use transport.
Yeah.
So all those, this is an example of the tertiary sector. All those activities which are supporting. For example, if without banks, how you can exchange your products? Okay, money is used as a minimum exchange. So banks are required actually.
Yes.
So many financial activities are supporting the primary and secondary sector. Then another category also, that all those activities which are helping in the distribution of goods. For example, public distribution system. During this corona regime, public distribution system plays a very crucial role, distributing food grains which are collected, kept in the Food Corporation of India to the people. Okay, all those distribution activities are also part of, for example, markets. All the shops, mandis that you are seeing, the retail shops, also wholesalers, distributors, they are all coming under the service sector activity because they help in the distribution of goods and services. And thirdly, for example, there are police forces, many people are protecting us, from doctors, all of those who are protecting us, help us in living this life. They are also coming under the service sector. And there are some activities which are independent. For example, entertainment. We go to cinema theater, we go to see different places. So they are also now emerging. They are also coming under the term called service sector. Service sector is also called as service activities. Okay, since they are part of the seva, so it is also called as service sector. Then now we have come to understanding that there are all the economic activities can be classified into three. Okay, and what is this term called GDP? The gross domestic product is all the total value of goods and services produced in all the three sectors.
Okay.
All the final goods and the services produced in a country in a particular year, 12 months. It is called gross domestic product.
Okay.
Okay. Final goods means, what is this final good? I already told you, sugar before reaching the consumer. When at the point of the consumer, it is a final good.
Yeah.
Okay. So the value of the final goods only is estimated.
Okay.
Okay. To come to the concept of gross domestic product, I'll tell you more example of this actually. Okay. And generally, the gross domestic product is estimated in different ways, mainly by the value added method. I'm going to explain what is this value added method. And then second method is called income or expenditure method.
Okay.
For example, income and expenditure means all the people's incomes. For example, your parents may be earning, or like all the people here working here, they are also earning, I am also earning. All the earnings, all the incomes of the people from different production of goods and services, if you add them, they will, that is also one way of calculating. But it is not that easy to calculate. So because of this, the people, like the planners all over in the world, they are following another method called value added method.
Okay.
What is this value added method? I am going to show. But before that, you also have to keep in mind that GDP means gross domestic product, means all the value of goods and services produced in a country. Okay, it is not to do with the assets. Okay, the assets held by the people. Many people may be here, they may be accumulating assets, but they are not GDP. They are not part of this GDP. Okay, it is a value expressed in money terms. Okay, so it is not the counting. Okay, and it is also not money. For example, many people having money. So if you put all the money together, you may think that could this be GDP? No. If that is the case, the government can print simply notes and then say that I become rich. Okay. So it's not that easy. It's not a money that is people keep in their hands. It is the production of goods and services, the productive capacity. Okay, so that is why the productive capacity increase is an important component for improving our livelihoods. Okay, so assets is not component of GDP, and whatever the money people hold in their pocket is not GDP. Okay, how GDP is estimated? Okay, I told you this is how you can measure it. You can measure it in the form of weight, how many kilograms. Okay. But if you want to estimate GDP, please keep in mind GDP is an estimate. It's not absolute number. It's not finite number. Okay, 2 plus 2 equal to 4. That is a finite number. Whereas in GDP, you are accumulating, collecting all the details, and you are making an estimate, a rough estimate. Okay, so this can be maybe 100 gram, 200 gram. Okay, but its value is always expressed in the form of money. Okay, it's in the form of how many kilograms under how much is the price. Okay, and the price and the quantity, you will get a number, a fixed number. Okay, and sugar also, you will get a fixed number. How much rupees worth of sugar. Okay, like that all other commodities also you can get a number actually. So if you ask me how this GDP is estimated, let me give you a simple example. Imagine a country where only 5 goods and services are produced. What are those 5 goods? Rice, pulses, oil, cloth, transport. Okay, so you have some, say, 1,000 kilograms of rice is produced. Suppose rice or wheat actually. Okay, and if every kilo is 25 rupees.
Okay.
So 25 per kilo and 25,000 kilograms, how much it comes to? 25,000. Suppose you produce pulses, harar ki dal, dur dal, and different kind of dal items. Then you are producing 25 kilograms.
Okay.
So that cost 80 rupees per kilo. How much it comes to? 2,000 rupees. Okay. Then oil. How much oil you produce? You produce some 25 liters of oil.
Okay.
Okay. And then every per liter it is costing about 100 rupees, 2,500 rupees oil.
Okay.
Okay. Then cloth. Cloth is measured in terms of meter. The shirt and all the dress that we are wearing. So you get some 100 meters cloth you were able to produce. So that should be converted into how much per meter? 100 rupees per meter. Let us assume. So 100 into 100, you get 10,000 rupees.
10,000.
Okay. And just transport. How much transport you use or people are using in that country? So they may be using, say, 100 kilometers. Totally 100 kilometers of vehicle they have used actually. So per kilometer they pay 20 rupees for transport charges. So that will run into 2,000 rupees.
Yes.
So can you just estimate how much totally it comes down to? 25,000 plus 2,000, 27,000 plus 2,500, 29,500 plus 10,000 and then 2,000, 41,500. Total value of GDP in that imaginary country where 5 goods and services are produced is 41,500. Okay, the total value. So this is the total value of the final goods. The final goods used at the place of the consumer. Okay. How GDP is estimated? See, now it is in terms of goods, I told you.
Yeah.
Generally, how it is estimated? Because this may be going from farmer to different places and finally it is coming here. Okay. And the wheat also, like wheat flour also, it goes to different stages actually. How generally the statisticians of the country estimate the GDP? I already told you that GDP estimated on the basis of the value added method.
Yeah.
What is this value added method? Let me give you an example of a bread. A bread, that this bread packet is costing 10 rupees. How much price? 10 rupees.
Okay.
Okay. This 10 rupee is the total value of the contribution goes from the bread actually.
Okay.
Okay. But if you come to the value added method, the first stage it comes across is that it is wheat.
Yeah.
Okay. The wheat is sold by the, let us assume that wheat is sold by the farmer for 2 rupees.
Okay.
How much rupees? 2 rupees. Okay. And first stage, the value added by the farmer is 2 rupees.
Okay.
Okay. And then it goes to the miller. I am giving example of a Shankar. Shankar is a farmer. So he adds the value of wheat. He sells it for rupees 2 rupees.
Okay.
Okay. Then it goes to the hand of a miller, Kuldeep. Kuldeep is a miller in Punjab. He converts into wheat flour.
Okay.
He make it worth of 4 rupees.
Okay.
He bought this for 2 rupees. He put all other raw materials, he put his effort also, he made some profit, and then he sells it for 4 rupees.
Okay.
But when value is added, how much value is added?
2 rupees.
2 rupees plus 2.
Yeah.
2 rupees only he has added,
Yeah.
because earlier it was already having a value here.
Yeah.
So it is 4 rupees. What is the value added in this stage? Second stage?
2 rupees.
2 rupees. Very good. So third stage, what happened? It goes to the baker.
Okay.
So the baker, what happened? Before going to the retailer, He converts this wheat, uses his machinery, employ laborers, and packet it. Actually, he sells it for 7 rupees. Okay, he sells it for 7 rupees. Okay, how much he has added value?
6.
No, here it is 2 rupees.
Okay.
Here he has added value 2 rupees.
Okay.
From 4 rupees he has added value to 7 rupees.
Okay.
So value addition here is 3 rupees only.
Okay.
He has converted this wheat into bread, and sells it for 7 rupees. So he has added value of 3 rupees here actually.
Okay.
Then it comes to the retailer. Okay, the retailer, by packing it or by keeping it in a shop, he sells it for 10 rupees. So how much value he added?
7 minus 10, 3.
3. Very good. So the 3 rupees value he has added actually.
Okay.
Okay. So generally what happens, I told you the GDP is the final good, the value of the final goods. Okay. So this 10 rupees is also one way to calculate. There is another way you can calculate. Here how much is the value added?
2.
Just take out your notebook, write down 2. Here how much value he added?
2.
2 plus 2?
4.
4. Here how much he added the value?
7.
So by 7 means how much?
Plus 3, plus 3.
Plus 3. From 7 rupees, how much the retailer added value?
3.
How much?
3.
So what is the value additions at all 4 stages? 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3. 10.
Yeah.
So the 10 rupees was value addition takes place at 4 stages of production process.
Okay.
So either it could be 10 rupees or value addition takes place at every place. Okay. These are the 2 ways you can arrive at the final the GDP. Okay. Value addition takes place at every stage of the production processes is estimated.
Okay.
Okay. So this is how the GDP is estimated in the value added method. Okay. Value addition at each stage of the production processes is calculated. Okay. That's it. Then I'll give you one small activity. Okay, you have to say, just write down your notebook in a separate paper. I'll give you one minute for you also. I'm going to sugar used in the house.
Okay.
Is it a final good or raw material or intermediate good? Just write down quickly.
Okay.
You can write in abbreviated form.
Okay.
Rice used in the hotel, intermediate good or final good or raw material?
Okay.
Third, iron ore used in the steel mill, is it a raw material or intermediate good or final goods? Coal used in a thermal power plant, is it a raw material or intermediate good or final good? 5. Electricity used in the sweet shop, is it a raw material or intermediate good or final good?
Okay.
Electricity used in the house, is it a raw material or intermediate good or final good? Okay, so can just tell your answer. Sugar used in the house?
Final good.
Very good. Rice used in the hotel?
Intermediate good.
Very good. Iron ore used in the steel mill?
Raw material.
Good. Coal used in the thermal power plant?
Intermediate good.
Good. Electricity used in the sweet shop?
Final good.
Electricity used in the sweet shop?
Intermediate good.
Intermediate, because that's not reaching the final consumer. He uses electricity to produce sweets.
Okay.
Okay. Electricity used in the house?
That is final.
Very good. Okay. So this is how you can classify the goods into 3, and then you can also look at the how value added method is used to arrive at the gross domestic product. Let me give you the definition again, because it is important that goods are identified and separated to estimate GDP. Okay. Generally, when you are estimating GDP, goods are estimated, whether it is value addition takes place. So you have to estimate whether it is a raw material or whether it is intermediate good or the final goods.
Okay.
Okay. And then GDP is the total value of final goods and services produced in a year.
Okay.
Why we are using final goods? Why we are using final goods? Because suppose you are having a 2 rupees here,
Okay.
and then 4 rupees here, and here it is 7 rupees and 10 rupees. Only this has to be added here. If you add all the things, it will come to double counting.
Okay.
2 plus 4 plus 7 plus 10. So it will come to double counting, triple counting. Only one commodity you are producing,
Okay.
but its value you are counting at different places.
Okay.
That is why we are using only final goods. Okay. These final goods is coming under the different value addition takes place.
Okay.
So you get the one number. So in order to avoid double counting or multiple counting, you are estimating, you are using the term final goods. Okay. Then I'll give you another example. Now you have classified the goods. Now one more assessment, and you can answer by tick mark by saying true or false. Doctors working in the hospital is part of the secondary sector. True or false?
False.
Correct. Security staff working in a spinning mill appointed by the mill is a secondary sector worker.
True.
Good. One way to classify all the economic activities is primary, secondary and tertiary. True or false?
True.
Good. Sugar used in a tea shop is a intermediate good.
True.
Very good. Rice cooked in the house is an intermediate good. True or false?
False.
Good. Goods and services produced by Indians working in South Africa is included in the gross domestic product.
False.
Good. Those goods and services produced within the domestic territory only is calculated for GDP. Okay. If it is produced in South Africa, it is not part of the GDP of India. All three kinds of goods and services are included in the to estimate GDP. True or false?
True.
Good. Value added method is used to estimate GDP from primary and secondary sectors. True. This is a very tricky question. See, value addition is possible only in the case of goods that are visible. Okay. In case of service sector, for example, the value addition may not be of much useful actually. Okay. So generally, the value addition added method used mainly for the primary sector and secondary sector.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Rahul. You have answered almost all the questions with regard to the what is meant by a sector, how goods can be classified into three in terms of raw materials, intermediate goods and final goods. We also come to know that how the value added method is used to estimate gross domestic product. Thank you very much. In the next section, we will discuss about what is happening to the GDP of countries, how GDP is examined, okay, how it is connected to employment. In these issues will be taken up in the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rahul, for coming to the studio.
Sir.
Welcome all the students of class 10, parents, teachers and other viewers. You are now in the social science class. We have a student with us in the studio. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Rahul. I'm from Modern International School, New Delhi.
Thank you. You are aware that social science constitutes many subjects: history, geography, economics, political science, sociology, business studies and others. Among all subjects, economics is an important and also interesting subject. This subject is introduced in rudimentary form in class 6. In class 9th and 10th, some important economic concepts which we come across in our daily life are introduced. In the previous session, we discussed about how goods can be classified into three on the basis of the stage in which it is produced. They can be classified into raw material, intermediate goods and final goods. We also looked at how economic activities can be classified on the basis of the nature of the production processes, how the goods are produced. We looked at primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. We also introduced you to the concept of gross domestic product. What is gross domestic product? How it is estimated by using one method called value added method. I also showed you the commodities like wheat, sugar, wheat flour, bread, how the values are added in each production stage actually. Now let us look at how India as a country has performed in terms of GDP. If you look at the way GDP is estimated in the country, there is one organization called Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. They collect data on all the goods and services produced in the country. Let us look at the way the GDP has increased over the years. I already told you that GDP is nothing but the total income of a country, the productive capacity of the country. GDP is not about the assets that we are having. It is not about the money that we hold in the form of cash. It is the productive capacity of the country estimated on the basis of the final goods and services produced in the country. Okay. Now we should know how much India is producing, what is the value of the GDP,
Yes.
whether we have increased our production capacity over the years.
Yes.
So for that purpose, I am showing you some diagrams. Look at this diagram. This diagram, the first diagram, contribution of sectors to GDP 1973 to 2014. If you look at the graph, I am giving you the data for 1973 to 74 and 2013 to 14. So if you look at the total value of GDP in 1973-74, it was roughly about 5 lakh crores. Totally how much we were able to produce? 5 lakh crores worth of goods. But today, if you look at in recent years like 2013-14, we are able to produce almost like a 60 lakh crores.
Yes.
60 lakh crores worth of goods and services we are producing in India. Okay. The colors that I am showing you, please careful, because we are going to use this color in the subsequent graphs also. The dark blue shows the primary sector, the light green shows the secondary sector, and the orange color shows the tertiary sector. Okay. So if you look at the agriculture production, primary sector, in 1973 we were able to produce goods worth of 2.5 lakh crore. Today we are able to produce worth of 8 lakh crores. If you look at the service sector, industrial sector, we were able to produce 1.1 lakh crores in 1973-74.
Yes.
Today we are able to produce 10.7 lakh crores. And if you look at service sector, which is slightly the largest producer even in 1970s as well as today, we were able to produce services worth 2.6 lakh crores.
Yes.
And today it is also the largest producer. Service sector constitutes about 39 lakh crores. I'm just rounding up the figure of 38.7 into 39. So 39 lakh crores. So almost like 40 crores.
Yeah.
40 crores out of 60 crores coming from the tertiary sector alone.
Okay.
So by this, you will come to know that the tertiary sector contributes more to the GDP.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a bar diagram which tell you only the numbers. If you want to know the proportionately which sector is contributing more, then we have to use some other tool called pie diagram. I'm sure in your mathematics class you must have read what is a pie diagram, how to draw a pie diagram. I'm showing the pie diagram here actually. So in the pie diagram, the same data I'm converting the raw numbers into percentages.
Okay.
So if you look at in 1970s, the dark blue part, the pie, the single pie constitute 40%. That means agriculture produced 40% worth of goods in 1970s. Today in 2013-14, it is producing only 14% of goods. Okay, from 40% to 14% it has come down. If you look at the service, like a factory sector or the secondary sector, in 1970s it produced about 17%.
Yes, sir.
Today it has increased to 19%.
Yes.
So if you look at 40 years, it has increased its share by 2% only.
Yeah.
And if you look at the service sector, it was producing 43% in 1973-74. Today it is producing 67%. Okay, so the service sector contribution from 43 to 67, it becomes the largest contributor to the GDP. Okay, and why this is happening, you may be interested.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the way, this is with regard to the output, it is with regard to the production. Okay, the value of the goods and services. Okay, who produce these goods and services? People.
People.
They may be working as a self-employed, they may be working as hired workers, okay, working for others, okay. So these people, we also should know how, what is the proportion of people working in different economic activities. That can also be used to same category, primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector. I am giving you the pie diagram for another 40 years, 2000, like 1977 to 1978 to 2017-18. So if you look at the dark blue or grey color, you will find that in 1970s, 71% was engaged in agriculture sector. Today, 44% is engaged in agriculture sector. Okay. From 71 to 44 is a great achievement. Okay. Now, if you look at the service sector, it was employing only 18% in 1970s. Today, it is employing only like about 31%. It has increased its share from 18 to 31%. How much it is increasing? Almost 13% share it has increased. In terms of employment also, service sector is contributing more. Factory sector, which is in light green color, it has increased from 11% to 25%. So how much it has increased? How much it has increased in terms of contribution? Secondary sector means people working in factories, people working in electricity, people working in construction sector. They're all coming into the secondary sector. So their share also it is 14%. So if you look at the factory sector, its share is increased by 14%. And both service sector and secondary sector, their share has increased more or less similar level. Whereas in case of agriculture, it has cut down from 71% to 44%. But if you look at today's scenario also, who was the major employer? Who is giving the major employment here? It is the agriculture sector. Okay. So earlier it was 70%. Almost 3/4 of the people were engaged in agriculture. But today it is around 0.5%. Only 2/5 actually. Okay. So 44% is engaged in the agriculture sector. So this means even today also agriculture is the major employer in India.
Dr. Srinivasan, so what do you think, increase in agriculture or decrease in agriculture or increase in tertiary or decrease in tertiary would lead to economy?
What is good for the economy that you are referring to? Very good question that you asked. In fact, we are going to come to that point in the next slide actually. Okay. If you look at generally, a country can become developed country. In this process, many things happen actually. A country can become developed country. In this process, the share of agriculture comes down, both in terms of production, both in terms of employment. In production and employment, for example, in India, from 71 to 44% has come down in the 40 years. So it is a good symptom that people depending on agriculture has to come down. Similarly, output. The output earlier it was 40%. 40% of the total production. Now it is 14%. So that decline in the output, decline in the employment in agriculture is good. People move from agriculture to other activities. That is good for the economy. But if you, I am just giving you some comparison how other developed countries are performing in this area. Look at this chart, this pie diagram. If you look at the dark blue, how much primary sector is in America, USA? It gives you in agriculture, like in case of GDP in America, only 1% is coming from agriculture.
Yes, sir.
And if you look at the secondary sector, almost 18% is coming from the secondary sector. And Baki 77% coming from the tertiary sector. So the tertiary sector is the major contributor. Okay. And agriculture constitutes only 1%. If you take other developed country like Japan, I already told you that in the previous sessions when we discussed about development, that Japan is also one of the developed country having the higher level of income actually. Okay. And if you look at the Japan situation, in Japan almost like 1% is employed, that like if you look at the output level, only 1% is contributed by the agriculture. Okay. If you look at the factory sector, secondary sector, 30%. The 30% of the output or production comes from the factory, secondary sector. Tertiary sector, and it is around 70%. Okay. In developed countries, primary constitute very minuscule proportion of output actually.
So, doctor, in order to get a good GDP, so in which sector should increase? Like,
so obviously, the tertiary sector is the final destination.
Okay.
Okay. I'll give you another data. This is with regard to what I discussed to you is with regard to output, production.
Okay.
If you look at employment level, in America, only 1% is engaged in agriculture.
Yes.
The 79% is engaged in service sector. Okay. In factory sector, about 20% is engaged in
Yes, sir.
factory secondary sector. If you look at Japan situation, in Japan also 25% is employed in secondary sector. In agriculture, only 3% is employed.
Yeah.
So the people have to move from agriculture and then to industry and then to finally to service sector.
Yeah, so that means that their increase in literacy rate and they are being more educated.
That could be possible actually.
Yeah.
But if you look at the employment and in the output, they have to move from agriculture to secondary and then to tertiary sector. That is how many countries have developed. Countries have moved from agriculture to other activities. If you look at the way India, China, what is the situation in India and China? If you look at India's situation, almost today in terms of employment, because why I am comparing here India and China figures, because these are the developing countries. You already know that according to the World Bank classification, India and China, they are part of the middle income countries. Yeah. Okay, so how these two countries, which are major producers, are having largest amount of GDP, how they are performing in terms of employment. In India, I already told you that 45% is employed in agriculture, 24% is employed in industry, and 31% is in service sector. Yeah. If you look at China, China is also having similar figure, but the dependency on agriculture is very less. Yeah. Only 27% is employed in agriculture, and factory employment 29%. People may say that the manufacturer of the world is China, but if you look at the employment figure, only 29% is employed in factories. In India, it is about 24% actually. In service sector, the China is moving higher level because almost 44% of people are employed in service sector. Yes. Okay. So in historical trajectory, if you look at 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, people move from agriculture to industry and then to service sector. This happens in already developed countries, and this is also happening in the middle income countries like India and China. Okay. And then so you may be interested in that why service sector contribution is more. Yeah. Okay. I already told you that these days, if you look at 40, 50 years before, we did not have all the motorized transport facilities. People used their bullock carts to transport goods. But today you have motorized vehicles, so a lot of technology has come, many new vehicles have come. So because of which what happened, there is an increase in demand for those services, service activities. People no longer wanted to walk, they want to travel. Okay, so the demand for the service activities have increased in both primary and secondary sector. Okay, that is one reason why the service sector contributes more now. The demand for service sector has increased. Yes. The second thing is that when people's income increases, the need for service activities. For example, when people's family, like many families now witness that when their income increases, they go for a outing, they go for a hotel, once in a week, once in a month, they go for travel, tourism, they go to different places to see. Okay, so the entertainment, recreation, these activities increase actually. In the same way, if you look at the other reason is that the financial development. Okay. So for example, earlier we had very few banks, today we have many banks now established by, so the financial activities are also increasing now. Financial means it includes banks, insurance companies and non-banking companies, they are all getting set up. Many more now. That is one of the reasons why service sector contributes. They are all part of the service sector activities. So their demand is increasing, so service sector contribution is more actually. And many times what happened, like governments, 50 years before or 100 years before, many countries were not democratic governments. They were all ruled by the kings, rulers, kings. But today, most countries are democratic governments. So when they are becoming democratic governments, they take a lot of responsibilities in the interest of in the interest of people's welfare actually. For example, in India, we had only 5 lakh schools in the whole of India, 5 lakh institutions. But today you have almost 15 lakh schools. The number of hospitals have increased, the amount of road has increased, the kilometers of roads. So all the basic facilities, for example, most of the electricity is produced by the government today. Okay, and so the democratic governments, they take responsibility in providing basic infrastructure facilities. That means they are all constitute part of the service sector. Then, for example, new activities. For example, 20 years before, you may be very, you may not be knowing about it. 20 years before, we did not have computers we have today. For example, now I am getting recorded this in advance before it is getting telecasted by using computers and many other technologies. The computer technology, information communication technologies have come into big way. For example, many countries, many companies like Infosys, they produce softwares by sitting here and they send it to export.
Okay.
That constitutes crores of rupees in a year. So the new activities are getting emerged over the years. They are also part of the service activities. Then there's one more trick also matters here actually. Service sector means it does not mean that like everything is produced in a better manner. There are limitations with this measurement also. How the value of the service sector production is estimated. One way is that suppose I already told you that when you are producing a bread, it is the value addition on the basis of which the production is estimated. In case of service sector, for example, I am working in a government job. Okay, my services, my value of services is estimated on the basis of the earning that I am getting. Suppose you are going on a roadside, you look at a cobbler, you are getting your footwear mended actually. Okay, then you are paying what you are paying, whatever the amount he is asking, you are paying him. You may be paying 20 rupees or 10 rupees, 50 rupees. Okay, so the value of the service sector contribution is based on the salaries people earn, but doesn't mean that the output is same. For example, when the government introduces a pay commission salaries, okay, for example, my salary 10 years before was one amount, say about 50,000 rupees, and today I am earning 1 lakh rupees, but my output did not increase suddenly. Okay, so it is just a notional actually. Since it is based on the salaries, it is estimated. Sometimes it is also showing an inflated number. Okay, so it is not that the exact output. Whereas in farmer case or in case of a factory, they are measured in the basis of value addition actually. But this kind of value addition cannot be easily seen in the case of service sector. Okay, and you will also find that because of this estimational issue, sometimes service sector production level is getting inflated. That is also one of the reasons why service sector contribution looks very high actually. If you look at what are the limitations of GDP? GDP has all the limitations, but I am giving you one or two only. A wheat produced today by using lot of machinery, tractors, harvesters, threshers, and a high yielding variety of fertilizers, pesticides, so on, irrigation, so on. But a wheat produced 50 years before, how it was produced? There was no there was no tractor. People have to plow by using animals. Okay, and we used to put lot of laborers actually. So can you compare the 1 kilogram, the amount of effort taken today is equivalent to the amount of effort taken 50 years before? At the time, lot of human power was used, animal power was used, but today it is a modern electric power is used actually. So can this be two compared? No, it is not easily comparable. Today's worth of wheat. Today, for example, I am showing this wheat. It is using a lot of technology. Okay, but 50 years before we did not use that much technology. Okay, so GDP does not tell you how it is produced, what technology is used. So this number is also very problematic actually.
I got it.
Okay. Secondly, for example, a wheat produced in Punjab, wheat produced in Arunachal Pradesh, can this be comparable? In Arunachal Pradesh, it is a hill. You produce with only manpower. Here you are producing with a lot of other technology. So there are many limitations with regard to estimation, GDP as an estimation. And why agriculture is still the employer? One reason is that we are not able to generate sufficient employment opportunities in India. And for example, in agriculture sector, if 2 people are able to produce this much of wheat, but actually 5 people are employed because no other employment opportunities are available.
Underemployment.
This is called underemployment, or this is also called disguised employment. If the government, if all the community takes initiatives to shift those surplus employees from agriculture to other sectors, it is possible that
There is increase in GDP.
there is increase in GDP,
Yes.
and there is underemployment will come down. Why agriculture is still a major employer? Also because the government is now withdrawing itself since 1990s due to economic reforms, about which you learn later. But I would say that responsibility, decline in the responsibility of the government in many production activities is also major reason why agriculture is the major employer.
Okay.
Let me come back to the assessment. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
So take on your notebook, and then viewers, just take your notebook also, just answer these questions. If you are able to answer correctly, I'm sure that you will be like this session is doing fine. The first question: coffee served in my house is a final good. True or false? You can write T for true, F for false. Agriculture is the major contributor to GDP in 2013-14. True or false?
Okay.
In Japan, service sector contribution contributes more, maximum to the employment. True or false? In 4 decades, 1977 to 2018, the share of employment in agriculture has decreased. True or false? In 4 decades, the share of employment has decreased. In sixth question, in United States of America, agriculture contributes maximum to the output. 7th question, disguised unemployment is more in the service sector. True or false? So the learning outcomes of this chapter is that you should be able to interpret the bar and pie diagrams associated with income and employment. The second thing we are expecting from you that you should be able to evaluate criteria to classify goods, economic activities, enterprise, people.
Okay.
Okay. Then you should be able to recognize the interdependency, how people are depending on each other in different sectors. And then you should be able to define what is GDP, what is primary sector, what is secondary sector, what is final goods, what is intermediate goods, and so on. You are also expected to define GDP, what is GDP. Okay, and you should be able to explain how GDP is estimated using value-added method. Then finally, you should be able to analyze how GDP, the value of GDP has changed in India, and how it is performing in comparison to employment. Okay. And if you are able to compare with the developed countries also, and show that you have achieved the learning outcomes. Okay. So is that clear to you now?
Yeah.
Thank you, viewers, for watching this session. Today we have discussed about the gross domestic product, and we have also discussed about classification of goods, classification of economic activities into 3. And in the next session, we will be discussing about what are the other ways we can classify economic activities. We will be looking at particularly 3 ways, for example, organized, unorganized, private, public, and so on. Thank you very much for watching this session. Welcome to all the students of class 10, parents, teachers, and others. You are now in the social science class. We have a student with us now. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Rahul. I'm from Modern International School, New Delhi.
Thank you, Rahul. Among all the social sciences, economics is an important subject. It is also treated as queen of the social science. This subject is introduced in class 6 in some simple rudimentary forms. In class 9th and 10th, all the important economic events, concepts, and processes which the children, you all see in your daily life. Rahul, can we just recall what we have learned in the previous session? So I am going to ask you some questions. Okay. And let us see how we have discussed, whether our discussion went on very well or not.
Okay, sir.
You know that the economic activities are classified in 3 ways.
Yes.
One of the important classification is that primary sector.
Yes, sir.
So can you give an example of a primary sector?
Agriculture, fishing, and all.
Very good. There is another sector called, like for example, tertiary sector. Yes. It is also known as service sector. Yes. So can you give 1 or 2 examples of service sector activity?
Trade, communication, banking.
Okay, can you see anybody who is here working here who
The
belongs
studio people.
So all the studio employees of NCERT is also part of the service sector.
Yes.
So give an example of secondary sector.
People working in industries.
Okay, that's very good, Rakul. So we also know that the classification is an important skill, essential component, essential analytical skill. We are all learning when we go to school, particularly in the secondary stage. Okay, so we also have to see the commodities. How the I also showed you how gross domestic product it is estimated. What are the commodities, at which stage they got included actually. So I'll give you one question. You tell me, give an example of a intermediate commodity, intermediate good.
Sugar, when reaches the retailer, then it is an intermediate good, but when it reaches us, it is a final good.
Yeah, very good. So the sugar which people are using in your house, we all know that we are using for making tea, coffee, all the sweet items. So when it reaches the final consumers, it's called final good, intermediate, like final good. But in case if it is used by a bakery, a tea shop, a hotelier, it is a part of the intermediate good. So, so two classifications that we have seen, that agriculture, industry and service sector. This is one way of classification. We also saw in the previous discussion that how GDP has changed over the years. Yes. Okay, which sector is highly contributing to India now in terms of output?
Primary sector.
Sorry, it is the service sector. Okay. So today if you look at the, among all the three sectors, it is the service sector which contributes maximum. Almost 60% of the total GDP is coming from the service sector. Okay. The second major contributor is secondary sector. Okay. So nearly about 20%, 25% is coming from the secondary sector. Okay. Agriculture constitutes about 1/6 of the total GDP. Okay. So now we have to see that this is not the only way to classify. There are other ways of also things can be classified. Let me give you an example. Look at the slide. You are seeing in the screen. People are doing different activities. People work in agriculture fields. Okay. So many people working as agricultural laborers, and in India most of the agricultural laborers are women actually. Okay, and they don't get a regular salary. Whenever the farmer calls, then they are coming and working actually.
Yeah.
Okay, and there are people like me and many people here who gets regular income, monthly income. Okay, so today we are going to discuss how these people can be classified. What are the ways? Is it only the economic activities that form the major classification, or there other way of classifying it? For that purpose, economists, other scholars, they classify people's employment, the nature of employment, broadly into two. Okay. See, the one example, one nature is that people who are not getting regular jobs, who are paid very low wages, who are not getting, for example, pension, gratuity, or who are paid very like irregular employment opportunities, who are getting very irregular employment opportunities, they are treated, they are named as unorganized sector workers. In many other countries, they are also called informal sector workers. And then there are people who gets a regular income, they get monthly paid, and they also get a pension, they also get, if they are becoming sick, they are also going to their government or any employer, they also take care of the health expenses actually. Okay. On those categories of workers, look at the screen. This is the kind of employment that you are seeing here. These kind of workers, they are called organized sector employees. Okay. Why they are called organized sector employees? There are quite a good number of reasons actually. Okay. Please note that this category, the organized unorganized sector category, is not part of the any official classification. It is the economists and scholars, they classify these activities into organized and unorganized sector. In India, almost 93%, or for that matter 95%, and this proportion is also increasing day by day, year by year, they work in they are categorized as unorganized sector workers. And there are some small section of people who work in large enterprises, who works with the government organizations, who works in large factories. They are called organized sector workers. Okay. So how this has happened? Why this has happened actually? In many other countries, if you look at US, European countries, Australia, or some other countries like South Africa, you will find a major share of workers are in organized sector. Whereas in many developing countries like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, in those countries, a large number of workers are in the unorganized sector workers.
Yes.
Why this happens? Because one reason that the nature of employment, the number of labor laws that are practiced in India, they are very, very strict. Okay. For example, if a person is working in a factory, the labor laws says that he should be provided with the social security provisions. For example, he should be provided with the gratuity, he should be provided with the pension if he is working for 15 years or more.
Okay.
He should be paid if he is not well, he should be given medical expenses, he should be bear. You will find in many cities in India, there is one thing called ESI, Employees State Insurance Corporation is there. That corporation is running dispensaries all over India. Okay. So the many workers, factory workers, they go, when they become sick, they go to those dispensaries, get treated. Okay. That is why these kind of workers, they are called organized sector employees. Okay. But people like construction workers, agricultural laborers, domestic maids, that's a huge number of categories. Rack pickers, okay, and many other small employers. For example, the roadside vendors, they are all treated as unorganized sector workers. It is not only that it is the salaried people who are part of the organized and unorganized sector. There are people called engineers, doctors, many other professionals. They may not be working with the government, they may be doing independently on their own. But since they get a good amount of income on a regular basis, and their incomes are beyond the very relatively better income, they are also included as part of the organized sector. Okay. So this is the way the nature of employment forms the major criteria to categorize workers into organized and unorganized sector. Okay. Now tell me, if somebody is working in a private school, okay, a school teacher, is she an organized sector worker or unorganized sector worker?
Organized sector.
Organized sector. Why?
Because she must be giving her salary on time,
so
and
very good.
gratuity.
So a school teacher working in a private school, maybe like that school may be a very large school, maybe 20-30 people may be working, and that school may be providing provident fund facilities. Okay, so many such workers in private schools, private companies, they are also considered as organized sector workers. Okay. Then let us go to the other category. That we can also classify activity on the basis of who owns it, who owns the company. Okay. For example, this organization, the NCERT, which is developing this program, it is owned by the government.
Yeah.
Okay. Since it is owned by the government, people call all these enterprises as public sector enterprise. Okay. All the banks that you are seeing, particularly owned by the government, they are also part of the public sector.
Yes.
Okay. So then there are people, for example, you may be seeing the small vendors on the roadsides, grocery shops, and people are selling sweets. Okay. All the shops that you are seeing outside outside this office or outside the studio, and people may be selling on the mobile vehicles. Okay, they are all considered as the private sector. Okay, so the ownership is also important criteria to classify a company, an economic activity. Okay, so this is not the only ways actually. There are some companies which are owned by the both government as well as private.
Okay.
Let me give you one example. The Delhi Metro Rail Corporation, DMRC.
Okay.
Okay. This company is example of a joint sector company.
Okay.
Okay. That is because the Delhi government and the central government and also the many companies like Reliance, they put the money and they set up this company and they run it actually. Okay. And whoever is having the maximum share will have the decision making authority. You will learn more about how this decision making is taking place. But for the moment, you understand that when the government and the private individuals, they come together and set up a company, run it, that is called joint sector company. Okay. So the ownership of enterprises also is one classification used to categorize economic activities. In India, majority of the enterprises are under private sector. Okay. Only a small number of companies owned by the government. Okay. And some time back, about 30 years before, 20 years before, there were good number of enterprises owned by the both government and private. I will give you an example. Some 30 years before, nearby Delhi in Gurugram, one company was established, Maruti. Maruti was a car company which started producing small cars. Okay, it was a joint sector company because at that time, Government of India and the a Japanese company, they set up this company. Okay, and today this has become a private company. Okay, similarly, in the last 40 years, there were many joint sector companies established. Now they are all not there. Now most of these companies are now sold by the government to the private sector. So now the number of companies under the joint sector is declining, not so much actually. Okay, all those people who work in government enterprises, they are also called public sector employees.
Okay.
Okay. If somebody is working in a bank in State Bank of India, is he a private sector employee or public sector employee?
Public sector employee.
Public sector employee. Okay. If somebody is working in a HDFC bank?
HDFC Bank, private sector.
Very good. So many banks these days are also run by the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay. So the banks and many other non-bank finance companies and okay. Delhi Transport Corporation, is it a public sector or
public sector?
Public sector. Okay. Can you give an example of a private sector company that you come across in your daily life?
Tata Iron and Steel Industry is a private sector industry.
I already told you that workers in the organized sector constitute very small share, about 5 to 7% of the total workforce in India. You know how many workers are in this country? Almost like 500 million. That means about 50 crore people. So the 50 crore people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of them are self-employed, some of them are hired workers. That means they are working for others. Okay, and many of them are self-employed actually. Okay, in India, a good number of people are engaged in self-employment. For example, farmers is one category of self-employment. Okay, running your own enterprises is called self-employment.
Okay.
Okay. So, am I a self-employed or hired worker?
No, you are hired.
I am a hired worker. Okay. So, my employment status also, this is one way to classify employment nature, hired worker or self-employed. Okay. Okay. You will know more about this category, this kind of employment category in higher classes. Okay. So, that is why I am not discussing much now. So, who is responsible for protecting the workers, particularly in the unorganized sector? In many democratic countries, it is the government which takes the responsibility. Okay. So, the government enacted many laws to protect the interest of the unorganized sector workers. Why? Because since the Industrial Revolution, many factories got closed.
Yeah.
Okay. And many factories got emerged actually. They employed child laborers. And they, even now also you can find in some areas, factory owners employ people and make them work for 12 hours, 13 hours, 15 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. It is also common to see that in many factories which are highly hazardous, where accidents are more happening, people may tend to get injured, met with accidents. For example, one study shows that in every year, almost like 1.5 lakh people die of the industrial accidents alone, 1.5 lakh people. Okay. So, you also know that in many companies, many people are not paid properly or regularly. Okay. So, given this precarious nature of the employment, the government, the Indian democratic government has taken up lot of steps actually. So, it enacted many laws to protect the condition of the workers employed in unorganized sector.
Okay.
Okay. So, one such law is that Minimum Wages Act.
Okay.
So, this act was enacted in 1948 and it says that the government in consultation with the trade unions. Trade unions means, you know what is trade union?
No, can you explain?
Okay, trade union means if there are 7-8 workers, they come together, form an association and registered with the government. That is called trade union. Okay, so trade unions constitute major section of associations in India to protect the interest of the workers. So what happened actually, the trade unions and the government and the employers, all the three of them come together on a table, negotiate and fix wages. Okay. And after the fixation of wages, then the government declare that these are the wages need to be paid for the workers, whether they are in organized sector or unorganized sector, whether they are working in private sector or in public sector or in joint sector. So the people, the employer has to pay that minimum wage. Okay, that is called Minimum Wages Act. And there is another act also, it's called Gratuity Act. You know that in any enterprise there are employers and there are employees. The Gratuity Act says that if an employee working in a company for a specific period of time, he should be or she should be paid a lump sum amount on the basis of the number of years he or she works in that company. You will find that people work for 20 years, 30 years. When they retire or when they leave the company, as per the Gratuity Act, based on the number of years of service, that employee is paid a lump sum amount. And then there is another activity called labor law called Equal Remuneration Act. What does that mean actually? In India, male and female are doing same job, but the females are paid less wages than the males. They may be doing the same job. I showed you the photograph where the women are working actually. Okay, a similar activity is also done by the males, but they are not paid equally. Okay, so in order to address this discrimination in wages, this law, Equal Remuneration Act, is been passed.
Okay.
And there are other laws also. For example, Factories Act. The Factories Act says that if you are a company, if you are employing 100 workers or more, and you should not close down a company without the permission of the government. Okay. Why? Because all the 100 people who become jobless, okay, they will suffer very badly actually. Okay. So the Factories Act is formulated to protect the interest of the employees who are very highly precarious. Okay. So I told you that these are the ways, different ways the government protect the interest of the unorganized sector workers. Okay. So now tell me I am asking you some questions actually. If you look at the screen, employees working in NCERT is a organized sector worker, true or false?
True.
Agricultural laborers are organized sector workers?
No, false.
False, good. When two private companies join together and form enterprise, it is called joint sector.
True.
A company employs 25 workers on a regular basis. It is a organized sector enterprise.
True.
Teacher working in a large private school is a organized sector worker.
True.
In this session, we introduce you to two ways of classifying economic activities. One is that based on the nature of employment, we discussed about organized, unorganized sector. We also discussed another important category based on the ownership of enterprise. Who owns the enterprise? It was very clear that based on the ownership, you can classify an enterprise as private enterprise, public enterprise and joint enterprise. We also discussed about the nature of these enterprises, what do they do. So this is the end of this session, and with this we are completing the chapter of class 10 economics, sectors of the Indian economy. Thank you.